A little bit different today, as you see. It's not been a normal week in Houston. Not going to be a normal video here. A little drive-in video for you, as I've been back and forth dealing with some hurricane stuff. Hope everybody is okay after the hurricane, if you had to ride it out in Houston and the surrounding areas. And hope there wasn't too much that you couldn't handle and that you couldn't go through. It is tough going through hurricane season, but it is always good to see just how good Houstonians are to each other. Help a neighbor out if you can in this situation. And hopefully talking some Texans football gets your mind off the situation for a few minutes. That's what we're going to talk about here in the video. The Jerry Hughes re-signing is pretty intriguing to me, because I would tell you that defensive end room is pretty solid. Like, I have a pretty good idea of the 1, 2, 3, 4 when it comes to the defensive ends. I mean, I feel like obviously Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson are holding down that starting defensive end situation. The Nico Autry is going to play a little bit of defensive tackle, but he's obviously the key backup there at the defensive end spot. And then Derek Barnett's back on this team as well. And Barnett was a nice player, and the Texans grabbed him from waivers last year from Philadelphia, and thought he played pretty well down the stretch, had a couple of nice moments, and the Texans ultimately brought him back. So how does Hughes fit into the equation, and how does he fit into the equation in training camp and potentially on this roster? Well, I don't know how he fits on the roster, but it's a guy that certainly still has something to the defensive end room that could push some of these depth guys. I mean, maybe in training camp, Jerry Hughes looks like he's got more than Derek Barnett, and they go with him over Barnett. But this really got me thinking about is the Dylan Horton situation, one of those where Hughes is there in case Dylan Horton is not able to get back on the field. Nick Caserio gave a positive update on the radio about Dylan Horton a couple of months ago, or a couple of weeks ago, about 5 or 6 weeks ago. But there's still a long road back for Dylan Horton, and even when he is back and he is playing or practicing for this team, you've got to assess where he is as a player and how much he can help. And you don't want to rush a guy back, coming back from something serious like the cancer situation that he was in. You want to give him all the time that he needs. So maybe Hughes is there because there's a chance Dylan Horton isn't going to be ready for when training camp rolls around and when the season is going to roll around. But I don't know how he totally fits keeping 5 defensive ends versus 4. Maybe Hughes is here because in very limited, tiny bits and pieces, he's a situational pass rusher for this team, but I'd much rather see Danico Autry and Derek Barnett and Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson on the field than Jerry Hughes. But the Texans like to rotate those guys. They like to move them around. They like to get them in and out. They do that hockey change on the defensive line sometimes where they go 4 in, 4 out. So Hughes could be a factor in that. Plus, it's never a bad thing to have another element of knowledge in the defensive room, the defensive line room. I mean, Will Anderson talked at length at times about Jerry Hughes and how important he was to him, and how the defensive line room as a whole was important to him and his development. He had a little bit of a younger defensive line coaching staff, so maybe having a veteran like Hughes also helps things out like that. I know what you're thinking if you've been on social media, and if you haven't, man, veteran defensive lineman added to the Texans. Sure wish that was J.J. Watt, and Watt's not doing anything to dispel the rumors that he'd be ready to come back, posting the pictures that he's been posting on social media. Except that he is dispelling all the comeback rumors with these posted pictures. When you look at J.J. Watt, he looks fantastic, okay? I mean, he obviously looks like he's in great shape. He's put a tremendous amount of work in after football to stay in shape and to look the way he looks. But go watch J.J. Watt when he played. Go watch J.J. Watt when he was the best defensive player in the world for a stretch in the NFL. He didn't look like he looks right now. J.J. Watt looked a lot thicker, a lot bigger, a lot heavier than what he looks right now. He did not look like Mr. Universe when he played. Now, I'm not saying J.J. Watt looked like some fat slob or anything, but he didn't look like this. He didn't look like a bodybuilder. That's kind of a bodybuilder setup, whereas I've always felt like defensive linemen, guys like Watt, who need to get down and dirty in the trenches, they've always needed to kind of be closer to power lifter. Yeah, you have some muscles, you have some definition. I mean, Danielle Hunter looks really good in his uniform, and you can see muscles and definition from that standpoint. But I've always felt like guys like Watt and what he did and how he was successful, I've always felt like they needed more mass than they needed to look like $1 million with their shirt off. So I feel like J.J. Watt, by showcasing what he looks like now, having it not look like what he looked like when he played, is kind of telling us, hey, I'm not really coming back. I'm just in shape. I want to look good. I want to stay in good shape. And these guys get into these routines in life about working out and looking good. And you see guys change their body all the time after the NFL. Some guys put on a bunch of weight because they don't have to lose weight and work out a bunch anymore. Offensive linemen are obviously notorious for losing a bunch of weight when they've been in the NFL. And Watt has slimmed and trimmed down. He doesn't look like playing days J.J. Watt. Now, if you told me he's a situational pass rusher, he's only in for a handful of snaps, sure, but I just don't know that that's what J.J. Watt is coming back for. And we've talked about this before on the channel. When you're talking about J.J. Watt, and when you're talking about the scenario and the situation to have him come back, it's got to be kind of that perfect thread the needle situation. Well, I don't know how you thread the needle, because if the Texans are good enough to warrant J.J. Watt coming back to this team, if the Texans are good enough that he's thinking, hey, they're going to make a run, they're probably good enough on the defensive line if they don't need a guy who's been retired for a couple of years to come in there and give them a couple of reps here or there. And if by some ungodly, awful situation, I'm knocking on wood, I think at least that's wood in my car, I'm knocking on wood here, that you don't have, like, say, Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson down the stretch, is that the type of team, the type of situation that's going to garner enough interest and enough thought from J.J. Watt to think, hey, this team's going where they're never going to go before, and I want to be a part of it. Like, I know that D'Amico Ryans and J.J. Watt have both been diplomatic about the potential for his return, and I like that they've done that and not totally and wholly just shut it down like kind of I am, where I'm thinking and saying, hey, Watt's not coming back. I think the body showcases that. I just don't know that the situation is ever going to align totally for J.J. Watt to be back on this team. And finally, if you had a little damage from the hurricane, you're no different than NRG Stadium, which had some damage to the roof. Nothing too terrible. Looks like they should be able to get that fixed up. But I do wonder, seeing the roof open, air quotes, open, I do wonder how many times we're going to see the roof open at NRG Stadium this year. And the game that I feel like absolutely has to have the roof open, and I've circled on the schedule, is the Lions on Sunday Night Football. That feels like a matchup that absolutely must have the roof open. So that's the one. I say we get one more. I say we get 2 roof open games this season. I hope I'm right. 2 roof open games this season. That's my hope. Hope you enjoyed this version of the video. Let me know in the comment section down below. Hope you're doing well. Let me know if you think that Jerry Hughes is here for depth or knowledge or a combination of both. What you think about J.J. Watt's potential return, and how many open roof games at NRG Stadium this year. Let me know in the comment section down below. Appreciate you watching. Hope you're doing great after the hurricane, if you had to suffer through that. If you didn't have to, hope everything else is going great for you as well. Appreciate you watching. Hope this was a nice little escape for you from whatever is ailing you throughout the week. It certainly is fun for me to talk about the Houston Texans. And we'll talk Texans again soon. Appreciate it, everybody.